Today we will travel to the world of martial arts, to experience the thrills and drama that today's series brings. At the beginning of the story, the quiet night sky in the middle of a magnificent city, a voice said, "Someone once said that there is no such thing as a beautiful or gentle death." A car with the bright headlights were rushing down the road. A young man in front suddenly turned around. The car rushed straight in, hitting the young man hard. The force of the collision was so strong that the whole car and the young man flew up and flew to the side. A chain flew out amidst the blood. The young man was thrown into the air with fragments of the motorbike. The car ran away, leaving the broken motorbike and the young man lying on the ground with blood splattered everywhere. The young man lying in piles of blood looked very painful. His hand moving, trying to cling to the road surface. The young man with his bleeding face looked up in pain and thought, "Am I going to die like this?" Back before, the young man was running. Car on the road, he said to himself, "Is my life normal? No, it's not normal. I followed someone else to university in the countryside Noryangjin. I prepared for the 9-level civil service exam for 7 years. I'm currently 33 years old and working as a delivery person, damn it." The image of his mother kindly appeared. The young man continued, "My mother. Because there's nothing I won't do to take care of me. Selling insurance, taking care of the sick, a restaurant, a flower shop." Then the image of the mother appeared again. Only a photo remained, the young man said, after his father passed away. "From the time I graduated from high school to the time I entered college, my mother took care of everything alone. All my father left my mother were debts. Last year my mother also passed away from cancer." Back to the present, the young man lying in pain on the ground thought to himself, "If I keep like this, if I die and go see my mother, I wonder if she will be proud of me. After all, this ugly sun is everything to me." Suddenly in the distance a light flashed. The young man was surprised. The necklace with the glowing red pearl. The young man was surprised and thought that the necklace lay at a distance from the young man. He weakly said, "That's my father's relic." The young man gritted his teeth with all his strength, trying to get up in pain. The young man tried to crawl forward, reached out to grab the necklace, silently thinking, "Even though my life has nothing." The exhausted young man raised his hand thinking, "This is the only thing." The young man's hand trembled as he approached the necklace. The young man grabbed the necklace, then he also collapsed. The necklace in his hand suddenly lit up. Rays of light passed through his fingers and escaped, illuminating an entire area. Transition, streams of blue light from the air, flying straight down to his head, of a person lying on the bed. Rays of light gradually sink deep into the middle of that person's forehead. Suddenly his eyes suddenly open wide. The soul of the young man from before has entered his body. That person suddenly sat up in surprise. "Why am I still alive?" Silently thinking, "I'm obviously dead, right?" His head throbbed. 2 pieces of memories were interlaced in his mind. He was surprised and thought, "Am I Joey?" Right now there were 2 people standing next to the bed. The woman was excited, "General, Joey has woken up." The man was worried. How do you feel now?" Joey didn't understand everything for a moment, so he replied, "Only my head is a little throbbing, the rest is okay." The man immediately said, "I've been unconscious for 4 days, it's lucky, I'm fine." Joey immediately touched the body and breathed a sigh of relief. The woman's face immediately became gloomy and she spoke, "She must be hungry. If her vitality has recovered, she should give her something to eat." "Is that it?" The man's face also became unsightly. The woman turned and asked, "General, is there still no news from Bang Dai Nyan side?" Joey thought to himself, if it is Bang Dai Nyan in this body's memory, Bang Dai Nyan is the one who has the monopoly on salt and iron in Anhui. All the iron manufacturing guilds in Anhui. If you want to forge knives and swords, you have to buy iron from Bang Dai Nyan. The man bent down and sighed. The people who want to meet Bang Dai Nyan are not just 1 or 2 people. People are waiting to pay their respects to him. There's a long line over there, we can only rely on luck. The woman then asked, "What about the Wati Kiem Mon side?" The man bowed his head in silence. Joey frowning. The image of a man with a cunning expression appeared. Joey thought to himself, "Hua Xiaomyang, you are the master of Wati Kiem Mon." Because of him, the iron manufacturing district was in an urgent situation. He announced that he would help meet Bang Dai Nyan for 2,000 taels, but after receiving the money, you disappeared. The man left and said back, "You take care of Joey, I'll go out for a while and then come back." The woman was worried. General. Outside the yard of the building, Joey stood in front of the house and lamented, waking up and seeing that this place really has nothing. Joey thought to himself, memories keep popping up in my head. Me. Joey's memories? The image of the man who was forging iron appeared. Jo-sun, Joey's father, worked as a blacksmith in the iron-making ward. The image of the woman from earlier also appeared. In addition, the mother is a gentle person who loves Joey very much, Kok Ah-ying. Next is a young man practicing martial arts, the foolish big brother that Joey always admires, Ji-hee. Continues to picture the image of a weak girl, her sickly sister Jo-yeon. Finally the image of the body that the young man is occupying, and finally it is me, Joey, who recites the entire Analects and Heavens, death literature. In just 3 months. In Joey's head right now were dozens of literary books, potion bottles, weapons, and a group of people with evil eyes. He thought in his mind, now there are a huge amount of knowledge, sometimes not, this knowledge is not Joey's knowledge, it is absolutely not knowledge that a normal person can have. But the most suspicious thing of all is the line, Sima, engraved deeply in this body's memory. Every time that line appears in my mind, I don't understand why. There's an uncontrollable anger in this body, everything is so chaotic, Joey thought. The scene changed again. Joey raised his hand and thought, it's like switching to another dimension. Different. I still clearly remember the pain before I died, it's so hard to accept this death. Joey scratched his head, gritted his teeth angrily thinking, damn. What is this? What should we do now? Why is this happening? Joey looked up at the sky in frustration, silently resenting, what am I being resurrected for? Joey's face showed anger, his eyes red and angry and said, King? General? Judge? Magic doctor? I have nothing. In addition to 7 years of experience studying for civil service exams, and part-time work experience. Joey walked away and thought to himself, so is it possible to become a martial arts expert? Suddenly had a cunning opportunity. Then become the top expert in martial arts? At this time, Ji-hee over here was struggling to practice his sword. Joey walked over and thought, yes, if it's martial arts, that guy is better than me. Joey's eyes turned to look at Ji-hee. Ji-hee swung his sword out. Joey silently mocked, but what is he doing? He looks so clumsy. Ji-hee continued to move his sword down. Joey did not stop thinking. It seems like an elementary school student who just practiced swordplay is better than this kid. Joey called out, brother. Ji-hee turned in surprise. Are you okay? Joey immediately replied, I can still walk here and there. Where did you learn that martial art from? When Ji-hee heard it, he was very proud and said, this. I learned it from my friend Jong-sam. When I bought him alcohol, he was born as a military mandarin. Joey's expressionless face silently thought, of course. Joey thought helplessly, even if you study this, it's useless, Joey immediately thought. Ask. Don't learn martial arts from martial arts officials. Why don't you learn martial arts from people in the gang? When Ji-hee heard it, he got angry and turned around and shouted, are you kidding? You also know that to learn martial arts, I went to many places. But I haven't met anyone in the gang. Joey immediately said, so that's it, sorry. In his heart he thought, so you ran away from home to learn martial arts. Joey raised his hand to his chin and wondered, so it must be much more difficult to learn martial arts from people of the 9 major sects, right? Ji-hee stretched and sighed, I didn't expect my brother to be that stupid. Joey heard this and was annoyed, thinking, I don't want to hear these words from an idiot. Images of people belonging to 3 sects, one creates fire. One can crush rocks. The other is skilled in using swords. Ji-hee began to explain, listen carefully, they are legendary characters that ordinary people like us can never meet in our entire lives. Even if they are members of the royal family, they would not dare to dream of learning martial arts from surname. After hearing this, Joey pondered and thought, if this idiot doesn't give up that cat-scratching martial art, he will be very miserable. Ji-hee was immediately surprised and tongue-tied. Are you thinking about learning martial arts now? Please teach me. Joey immediately turned around and raised his hand and said, I'm going to practice martial arts well. Joey sighed dejectedly. In swordplay novels, there are opportunities everywhere. The fate of meeting a martial arts master and being accepted as a disciple is all fake. Joey stood looking into the distance and thought, although quite confused. Image of the young man being hit by a car appeared again. Joey thought firmly. I have to live anyway. I hope this life will be easier. After all, being alive is better than being dead. The leaves fell. Joey's face was full of determination. He was steadfast, said that from today I will be Joey. Joey looked up at the sky and walked away, his eyes full of determination. Joey said, just live with this identity. The bright sunlight shined on in the sky of an ancient neighborhood. Joey said, it's been 2 months since I came to Trung Nguyen. The work here is simple. Joey was holding an axe to chop wood. He told that in the morning he and his brother went to chop wood. Next, Joey sat in front of the burning stoves. He continued, in the afternoon, I go make charcoal and sometimes clean the ironing room. He continued, next, I welcome guests to the ironing room. Josun happily held a bag of money. Joey continued, luckily father found money and solved the food problem. Late afternoon came to Joey's house. He added, I don't know where that thing came from. Joey and his brothers were sitting at the dining table, Kok Aying standing next to Josun. Suddenly, what did you just say? Josun looked to the other side and replied, I said I just borrowed 60 taels of silver from Yom Wang Chai. Kok Aying shouted in surprise. So the money we used was from Yom Wang Chai. Kok Aying worried, we don't have money to pay it back? Why did you borrow that money? Josun angrily replied, I have to buy iron ore and need living expenses, but stop complaining. Kok Aying angrily shouted, don't do anything. I heard rumors that if you paid too much term of 1 month, then your arms and legs will be cut off. What should we do? Josun gritted his teeth. Josun shouted indignantly, so are we all starving now? Let's go hand in hand to the underworld? We have to buy food with money. Kok Aying pondered. Josun walked away angrily. I said, I will know and hand it over to Yom Wang Chai. So don't worry about this anymore, let's go eat quickly. Joey sighed in boredom and thought, damn. I'm at a dead end. The old ceiling is full of spider webs. Josun's whole family is sitting down to eat. The atmosphere is extremely gloomy. Joey holds the rice bowl and thinks, this atmosphere is also real. The kitchen was full of old dust. A smell arose that surprised Joey. Joey's face dropped, thinking, this smell, the kitchen is not only old but also stinks. Joey thought to himself, dead is also a problem. But the smell is bad here. For me, maybe it's even more of a problem. The hygiene in this house is really messy. A hand placed a pair of chopsticks on the table. Josun sighed and said, it's been a long time since we last to eat a full meal like this. Josun brought the bowl of soup to his mouth to drink, and after drinking, he breathed out. Josun started to floss his teeth, which looked very unhygienic. Joey saw a few scenes. This is so scary. I sigh and think, Father, it's father. Joyeon happily spoke up, Mom. I just washed my hair after more than a month. Kok Aying next to me smiled and replied, our Joyeon looks so fresh. Joey heard this and thought in horror, is this something worthy of praise? I really can't adapt. Joey closed his eyes. Joey angrily gritted his teeth and thought, this is no good, we have to change this family. Joey walked up to Josun and asked, Father, can you find some bristles somewhere? Josun was surprised, bristles? Josun smiled and replied, there's a lot of wild boar, do you want it? I'll bring it home for you. It's free. Joey immediately bowed his head and replied, yes, thank you. The sunlight shone through the porch roof. A bag of furs was thrown on the ground. Joey looked at the giant bag of fur and said in horror, I just intended to make a toothbrush for my family. Joey sat down and said, but I have too much free time now. Joey picked up a hot iron and poked it. A tree branch, then apply something to it, and finally attach the bristles, Joey said. A toothbrush doesn't need any fancy techniques. Finally, Joey used scissors to cut the bristles to make them even. Joey looked at the brush and thought, I've finished one. Joyeon walked over and asked in surprise, what are you doing? Joey turned his head and replied, the wind is very cold, please go into the room. Joyeon puffed her cheeks. Joyeon angrily ran into the house. Joey looked behind and smiled and said, This girl. Joey looked back at the brush and said, let's continue working. The green tree canopy under the clear blue sky, the brushes are completed and neatly arranged. Jo-sun's eyes widened in surprise. What is this? Jo-sun opened his eyes in surprise. What is this? Joey stood next to him and instructed, use it like this. Dad, please follow me too. Jo-sun also brought the toothbrush to his mouth and asked, like this? Suddenly Jo-sun was surprised. Jo-sun seemed to be floating among the drops of water. He said with satisfaction, what is this refreshing feeling? Joey smiled and replied, it's called a toothbrush. I invented it. Jo-sun was extremely excited. Suddenly Jo-sun said, wait. Jo-sun looked over with a cunning look and said, this will probably sell well, right? Joey also responded to that look and said, looking at father's reaction, I'm sure it will be a huge success. Joey walked away excitedly saying, now let's take it to the market to sell, father. Jo-sun behind him holds a bunch of toothbrushes and replies, okay son. Scene changes at the market in the street. A group of people are lining up. In front of Joey and Jo-sun's stall, toothbrushes fall one by one. Down one by one, the crowd was all talking. Give me one, take me two. Joey and Jo-sun excitedly raised their hands in the air and shouted, so cool. Jo-sun excitedly said, 20 toothbrushes sold out in just 2 hours God. Joey held the bag of money in his hand and replied, we've already earned 500 Vietnamese dongs for just selling that much. This amount is equivalent to 5 taels of silver. Jo-sun was very surprised. In 2 times, you can earn 5 taels of silver? Jo-sun immediately pointed his finger. Shouted loudly, well, let's all go get rich. Joey immediately replied, if our whole family mobilizes to make this, we can make 3,000 pieces in a month. Joey excitedly said loudly, if I raise the price a little and sell all 3,000 pieces, minus the cost of raw materials, my profit will be 80 taels. Even if I pay off the debt, there will still be leftovers. Jo-sun immediately pointed his finger. Shouted loudly, well, let's all go get rich. A large bag of fur and wood appeared. Joey said, wild boar fur, wood and grass, buy those things in bulk. Kok Ayin and Joyin were excited. Joey continued, Mom and everyone were extremely happy when they heard this news. Joey's whole family sat down to make brushes together. Joey continued, so the whole family did it. Worked late into the night to make toothbrushes. Neatly arranged stacks of toothbrushes. The goal was to make 3,000. 15 days later at the market in the city. 2 people, Jo-sun and Joey. When he got there, he was so surprised that he dropped the entire bag of brushes in his hand. Jo-sun shouted loudly, what is this? A person holding a colorfully designed toothbrush said, look at this beautiful toothbrush. Come on, dear customers, this is an extremely valuable thing to give to your wife and daughter. On the other side, there were also 2 people selling toothbrushes. That guy said, this toothbrush, use it with rice water. Will significantly reduce bad breath. Other people immediately gathered around to fight, saying, give me 10 toothbrushes, give me 3 inches. At another place, a small toothbrush was also sold. That person said, there are also the kind for children too, please come and see. People selling toothbrushes on the street appeared everywhere. The man holding a toothbrush in his hand said, this is a toothbrush fixed with an iron core that our store personally developed. It is 3 times more durable than others and is extremely good to use. When Joey saw this scene, he was extremely frightened. Joey hugged his face and realized, intellectual property rights. I forgot that in this era there are no intellectual property rights. Jo-sun looked at Joey silently and worriedly, son, what should we do now? Joey turned in horror and asked, my father wants to ask this. There are only 15 days left until Yom Wang Chai's payment is due. Is that right? If I miss the deadline, will my arms and legs be cut off? Jo-sun was so scared that sweat flowed down his face and said, what should I do? Jo-sun and Joey stood dead in the middle of the street. The city is crowded. The sky is blue. The time to repay the debt is only 15 days. Joey stood in the middle of his yard and said, what should I do now? Joey put tay on his chin and thought, in the damn novels I read, everything the main character does progresses quickly. But Joey thought, or generate electricity. The other side of him said, but I don't know how. Joey continued thinking, what about making a steam engine? One side says, if there's no railway, why do it? Joey's face was tense. He continued thinking, is it okay to be a gun? One side said, but I just practiced shooting it, I don't know its structure. Joey stood engrossed and thinking. Joey came from behind and scratched his head and asked, what's the problem, brother? How's the water? Joey angrily replied, don't wash your hair anymore. Joey angrily replied, you actually said that yesterday too. Joey looked away and answered lightly, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, you should wash your hair. Joey heard it and shouted angrily, what are you talking about like that? Joey immediately replied, if it's too dirty, you can go to the river to wash it, we have 2 places in town. Suddenly Jihee came out and said, this morning is so refreshing. Did you sleep well? Jiwee's sword appeared. Jihee started doing martial arts moves with his sword. Joey saw it and thought dejectedly, is he that carefree? Joey thought to himself. My house looks like it's ruined, shouldn't we pretend to be a little worried? Joey ran towards Jihee calling the senior. Joey immediately told Jihee, second brother today is very strange. Jihee heard it and was surprised. What? Joey immediately explained, after collecting the toothbrush ingredients last time, he guessed correctly. The quantity will be completed with that amount of ingredients. Joey exclaimed, it's the first time I see someone who can calculate so quickly. Jihee also nodded and replied, yeah. I'm also a bit surprised about that. Jihee proudly said, I usually only read books but now I'm also proficient in calculations just like a mathematician. Joey thought dejectedly, for modern people, calculating by multiplication is nothing magical. Joey suddenly realized and thought, wait, the people here don't seem to know multiplication? Joey raised Tay to think, in this era, calculating rules seems to be a kind of technique, right? Joey continued to talk, and suddenly he started talking about progress. Of course, they just use confusing words. Jihee also replied, that's right, lately I sometimes don't understand this kid's words. Joey on this side continued to say, moreover, suddenly his speaking improved, he only used difficult to understand words. Jihee also replied, that's right, lately I sometimes don't understand this kid's words. To which Joey proudly thought, of course, I live in the modern world so my vocabulary must be different. I have memories of past lives. Suddenly, things in modern times made Joey suddenly think, I have learned and synthesized knowledge. From elementary school to full-time university for up to 20 years. I have lived in the era of informationization, being able to receive information through television and smartphones. Daily use, just watch TV series, novels, shows. Is to be able to clearly experience human psychology and characteristics. All of these are the reasons why she feels. My way of speaking has improved. Joey was surprised to realize that he thought to himself, if I compare myself to people in this era, am I a genius? No, it's not that simple, it's crazy. Suddenly Joey rushed forward and knelt down on the ground holding a tree branch in his hand. Joey shouted loudly, both of you get away. Joey didn't understand what was going on and asked, what's wrong? Joey used a tree branch to draw a line on the ground. The words Joey wrote on the ground. He thought, the core here is not technology or any object. Joey's eyes lit up as he wrote each word on the ground, religious ideology. Culture, politics, philosophy, art, technology. Joey thought, but all the knowledge I have learned in modern times. Joey and Jihee looked at the writing on the ground. Joey asked, brother, what did he write? Jihee replied confusedly, it's the first time I've seen words like that. Joey's eyes steadfastly continued to write on the ground. He thought, this is really dangerous, these things it's a bit too much. Joey crossed out many phrases on the ground, and finally circled one phrase. The other phrases had the meaning of market principles. The big economic text appeared, macroeconomics, general mathematics, dynamic theory, maximizing efficiency, rational spending. Supply and demand relationships, behavior in economics, interest rate calculations. Joey circled the economic cluster. Excitedly looked up to the sky and shouted, yes, this is it. The porch of the house lay quietly under the blue sky. Josun was working and turned to ask Joey, what did you say? Joey immediately replied, I want to pass down our family's iron room. Jo-sun turned angrily. What nonsense are you talking about so early in the morning? Joey sat down on the chair and calmly said, I have an idea and I want to do it. Jo-sun replied, You think so? Jo-sun sighed and said, It's not easy. Operations here are not simple. I have little experience and above all, I still don't grasp the essence of this job. Joey immediately said, I can earn more money? Jo-sun was angry. Earn more money? Jo-sun shouted angrily, The deadline is 10 days away. What else are you looking for, this guy? Joey raised his finger. Joey pointed in the other direction and said, That hammer costs 50 taels of silver. If you add all the tools and materials together, it will be more than 30 taels. Joey firmly said, In addition, I can also mortgage the iron room, thanks to the long-standing reputation of this place. If we mortgage the room and assets, we can earn up to 300 taels of silver. Jo-sun was surprised when he heard that. Joey raised 3 fingers and continued, I don't care about anything. If you let me borrow it, I promise to return it 3 times more. Jo-sun's face changed color and he gritted his teeth, thinking. He thought about it. Have you mortgaged this family's assets? The hammer is everything for an artist. On top of that, is he planning to sell his father, mother, and younger sister as mortgage? Joey continued, If you want to borrow money, borrow from a reputable place, like the Wa Long Trade Union, a reputable place. Very high, thanks to the convergence of merchants. Haven't you been there before? Jo-sun angrily raised the hammer to the sky and gritted his teeth as he said, This guy. Joey's face remained fearless and extremely cunning. Jo-sun was surprised by Joey's expression and thought, when did he become so determined and bold? Jo-sun kept wondering, did it change after that time? From the toothbrush thing too, does it have any plans? Jo-sun sat back in his chair and sighed and said, Okay, I know, you're a smart kid who knows how to fight. What exactly do you want to do? Joey spoke up. Ennui is the first Iron Ward. Joey firmly added, I want to turn our whole family into a powerful Iron Nation. Jo-sun replied in confusion, The Iron Nation? I don't. Do you know our current situation? Joey immediately said, If iron ore is a problem, we just need to buy the iron block. Jo-sun replied, Is that so? 2 black iron blocks appear. Iron block. A block made by removing foreign substances from iron ore and extracting it. Jo-sun immediately asked, Do you know its price? Joey immediately replied, If calculated according to the average price, it is about 3 taels of silver. Jo-sun put the hammer on the ground and said, You know that and still dare to say that? Quote. Joey immediately explained, The best-selling item in our iron plow is the iron plow, an extremely essential item for farmers. Joey raised 3 fingers and continued, We will sell iron plow and reduced its price by 1/3. Jo-sun was surprised. Jo-sun shouted in horror, Unbelievable. Do you know how difficult it is to make an iron plow? It's extremely difficult. Jo-sun worriedly shouted, Don't think it's that simple, it takes 15 days to complete. Joey calmly said, If I use that thing to make it, I can save time. Just follow me, then it will only take me 4 days to make it. Jo-sun heard it and shouted angrily, 4 days? You said it well, during that time I had to work tirelessly. The daily salary of a woodcutter is 10 Vietnamese dongs, 4 days is 40 Vietnamese dongs. Joey sighed. Joey immediately said, Who told you to do it? Jo-sun was surprised. A sophisticated iron plow, much to the interest of the others, Joey explained, Where is there a place that sells large iron plows for only 28 tael in the entire Anhui province? If there were rumors about such a place, people would definitely flock to it. Joey smiled and continued, Even if you buy it to resell, it's still profitable, from there we can mass produce it. Jo-sun worriedly asked, Have you lost your will? Joey laughed loudly and replied, It's normal. Joey stood up. Joey pulled out a notebook from his shirt. He said, First let's start by hiring 20 people first. Then take charge, educate and assign work to them. Jo-sun was surprised. Educate? A person doing the job of carrying firewood, Joey said. First is this way of making charcoal, followed by a person sitting in front of the fire. Jo-sun confusedly said, Can you explain more? Joey continued. I will be in charge of training 2 people at a time. Working hours are 6 times of God's. 4 people will take turns taking turns. Next was a person sitting in front of the fire. Jo-sun puzzled and said, "Can you explain more?" Jo-wi continued, "I will be in charge of training 2 people at a time. Working hours are 6 p.m. The 4 people will take turns taking shifts." Jo-sun's face was quite suspicious. The image of a person sitting in the stove. Jo-wi continued to assign tasks. Next is the ignition. Facing the fire will be a bit difficult. It's a bit difficult. Jo-wi held the notebook in his hand and continued, "So it's appropriate for me to take turns with 2 people at a time. The same principle with 6 times I'll take turns with 4 people on the other side, of course. I will have to instruct them on the appropriate temperature of the fire." Jo-sun thought silently. Next is a person using a hammer to hit an iron bar. Jo-wi said, "Next is the iron smelting stage. This stage is the most difficult, so it also requires the most workers. Currently there is only 1 belt, so a group will have 4 people and work in rotation for 6 times." Jo-wi continued, "A total of 8 people will change shifts. They will be the core workers, so we need good training." Jo-sun seemed to gradually understand. Continuing, as a person was pouring a stream of lava into a shaping frame, Jo-wi said, "The casting step is the next step. After the training step is 2 people. A group of 6 people take turns, so 4 people are needed." Jo-wi added, "I will be in charge of selling and promoting the business with customers. For now, the scale of the room is limited. Small, we will have to increase manpower." Jo-sun was surprised. Jo-wi continued to talk about his plan. The daily salary of a charcoal maker is 8D, a fire starter is 9D. The person who smelts iron is 12 dong, the person who casts is 11 dong, from which it can be deduced that the total operating fee per day will be 200 dong, which is 2 taels. Jo-sun raised his hands to calculate. Jo-wi excitedly raised 2 fingers. He raised his hand and said, "Initially, because the technical level of the molders will be poor, when produced, the expected number of plows will be about 20, and of course the output will gradually increase." Jo-wi continued excitedly, "So we will earn 400 Vietnamese dongs in 1 day. Minus the labor salary there will be 200 Vietnamese dongs left over, which is 2 taels if we sum up the balance for the whole month. Yes, it will be 60 taels of silver. Of course, my family's living expenses will have to be included, but I won't stop until the size of my room increases at least 20 times." Jo-wi with a determined look on his face. He was about to close the notebook and said, "Please explain again." Jo-sun looked up at Jo-wi in surprise. Jo-wi with a proud look on his face thought, "Oh my God, father, I don't know what to say. Because of my grand presentation, this comprehensive plan for ancient people is really quite sublime." The image of Jo-sun holding a hammer and hitting the iron creating sparks, Jo-wi thought, artisans in this era grasp the essence of their profession. They will breathe life into the product, shouldering a great responsibility, because they have to do all the steps. Jo-sun's face was tense. Jo-wi said, "But if you break it down, even if you're not an artist, you can still earn 60 taels a month." Jo-wi looked at Jo-sun, who was thinking. Jo-wi bent down and said to Jo-sun, "If I learn all those steps at once, it will take as long as my father said, but what will happen if I give up becoming an artisan?" Jo-sun thought to himself, "That's convincing." Jo-sun realized and opened his eyes wide thinking, "This is the opportunity." Jo-sun looked at Jo-wi and asked, "So are you confident in this matter?" Division of labor began with the British Industrial Revolution. Henry Ford opened a new age in industry. Production. Now I will do the same thing with the iron processing ward. Image of workers sitting in rows working. The light of bright sunlight shines down on the ancient town grand. A group of people stood in front of the city gate. Jo-wi's feet were full of scratches and dirt. He lifted his heels and thought to himself, "If I earn money, the first thing I will do is buy another pair of shoes. Damn, my heels hurt. Want to die?" Jo-wi looked away. Jo-wi spoke up and asked, "What are we doing standing here if we don't go in?" Jo-sun replied with a worried face, "Ah yes." Jo-wi walked away dejectedly and said, "Actually, in my heart, I secretly wondered what it would be like to be a father. In the end, I'm still just a naive uncle who doesn't know anything about the world." "Hey." The guard at the door saw Jo-wi. The guard pointed to the line of people queuing up and said, "Over there is the 3rd young master's guest, waiting in line for his turn to go." Jo-wi thought to himself, "What a sharp eye, Joey replied with a smile. Joey and Jo-sun walked to the line of people waiting to go inside. A soldier shouted, "Next." A frustrated person walked out. The soldier continued to shout, "Next." Joey and Jo-sun stood in line. Joey looked at the sad man walking out and thought to himself, it's not easy for only a few people to come out with bright faces. The soldier shouted loudly, making Jo-sun startled, "Next." Joey turned and said, "Father, please wait here." Jo-sun immediately replied, "Okay, I know." Joey walked inside. Inside was a person sitting. Joey stood opposite him. "Me." Joey opened his eyes wide in surprise. Joey looked at the person in front of him and thought, Lee Janjae. Lee Janjae spoke up and asked, "How much money do you need?" Joey thought to himself, "Your voice is different." He spoke, "I need 300 taels." Lee Janjae pondered. Lee Janjae looked down at his feet wearing poor sandals. Lee Janjae immediately waved his hand and said, "Take it out." Joey immediately said, "After 3 years," Joey firmly said loudly, you will definitely regret it if you chase me away now." Lee Janjae seemed surprised. Joey arrogantly said, "And this will probably be the biggest mistake of your life." Lee Janjae was surprised. "What?" Joey smiled and added, "Listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Right now you are the one providing iron necessities. Biggest in Anhui, but you're missing out on the opportunity to trade with the Iron Guild at the lowest price." Lee Janjae immediately asked, "Are you from the Golden Hill Iron Guild? Could it be the Black Fire Iron Guild?" Joey clasped his hands in front and said, "I am Joey, the second son of the Iron Guild owner Pong Taehyun. Of course I am here as the representative of the Iron Guild." Lee Janjae slammed his hand down on the table. Lee Janjae's expression became scary and he said, "Are you kidding me? You think the Fire Dragon Company is a name that someone like you can make fun of? Are you joking like that?" Joey breathlessly replied, "I don't know why the reputation of my family's smithy is so poor. I don't expect to have a trust transaction." Lee Janjae asked silently, "If so?" Joey took out the notebook from his shirt. A factory full of tools appeared. Joey began to explain, "Everything made of iron has a price and can be used as an object. Mortgage, 300 pounds of iron is about 500 taels, 2 big hammers, 2 small hammers, 3 iron grinding tables, 6 steel casting molds. Even if sold cheaply, all of that would still be 40 taels." Next, Joey's compound appeared. He continued, "The iron ward is 210 wide, the deck is 40 taels. The oak tree costs 3,000 jun. The spring incense tree costs 1,000 jun. The charcoal costs 400 jun. The firewood costs 3,000 jun. Iron ward." Joey continued, "That's about 10 taels of silver, which adds up to about 150 taels. I mortgaged all the things in the iron district." Lee Janjae said thoughtfully, "Do you have anything left to mortgage for another 150 taels?" Joey firmly said, "A father, mother, elder brother, me. I mortgage the lives of these 4 people too." Lee Janjae was surprised, "Lives?" Joey immediately replied, "At the darkroom, transactions related to human trafficking often take place. There are many types of prices, but as far as we know, the trade is also based on the standards of the mandarins. Anyway, the price doesn't exceed 150 tael." Lee Janjae tilted his head and smiled, thinking, "Even if you talk crazy, you're not a crazy person. That's interesting." Lee Janjae excitedly said, "That's okay, but everything you mortgaged requires money to handle. First I will send someone to check. See if the mortgages you mentioned are real or not, and recalculate their value. If you pay late, it will cost me more time and manpower to process your mortgages. Especially on the issue of slaves." Joey immediately replied, "That's why I came here to give you a chance for you to make a deal with me." Lee Janjae said annoyedly, "A trade? A chance? It seems like you're changing your position. Is it okay between the two of us? Why do you say that trading with your Iron Guild is an opportunity for the Fire Dragon Company?" Joey put his notebook on the table and said, "A list of all the items in this, my Iron Guild will sell to the Fire Dragon Company at a reasonable price." Lee Janjae was surprised when looking at the notebook and shouted, "Does a large iron plow cost 28 taels?" Lee Janjae asked suspiciously, "Can I really buy it at this price?" Joey immediately replied, We can sign the contract now. Lee Janjae looked at the notebook, deep in thought. Joey sighed. Joey turned his head away and said, "If you refuse to do business with me, I intend to go to a friendly trade union and make the same proposal." Lee Janjae frowned angrily and said, "What?" The veins on Lee Janjae's face appeared. He angrily thought to himself, going to the rival trade union? Are you challenging my pride? Lee Janjae loudly said, "Master General." The courtier next to him immediately bowed his head and replied, "Yes, sir. Please give your orders." Lee Janjae turned and said, "Give you 1,000 taels." The general manager suddenly said, Sir. Lee Janjae firmly said, "Since we mentioned the dark spots, we have to calculate the general price. It's clear it's about human life, and what you say means that your right to life and death is already in my hands. So I'll sell you to become a petty officer or a eunuch, right?" Lee Janjae pointed at Joey and said loudly, "Besides, there's no need to mortgage anything. If you can't pay, then that 1,000 tael will be considered money. I spent it to buy you." Joey put the notebook in his shirt and smiled and replied, "That won't happen. The sky is deep blue, the rays of sunlight shine on the porch." Joey walked out. Walking in front, Jo-sun walked behind and wondered, How is it?" Joey calmly replied, "Father, what is the most visible thing now?" Jo-sun was surprised and asked, "What is most visible?" Joey turned around and replied, "That's the worker. As soon as I return to Pong Ti-hyun, I will build a ward right at the entrance." Joey opened the door, so he said, "Well, let's see how many people have gathered." A series of people were waiting in front of the door. Joey walked out and shouted, "So we will start the interview next order." Jo-sun was surprised. Gathering so many people? On the premises of a building. The three people were laughing and talking to each other. Joey said, "First, eliminate people who talk a lot. People who talk a lot are often not honest, and easily incite and provoke people around them. So the next category is the group. Thin and lifeless people." Joey continued. "The second type is the old and sick people. The work in the iron ward is very hard. So they often can't stand it. The next type is the group of fat and stupid people." Joey continued saying, "The third type is people who are too stupid and have an empty mind that will make every process mess up, should be eliminated." Joey sat in front of the crowd of people lining up. Joey continued, "No matter what business, talent is the most important thing." Joey remembered in modern times. He said in his previous life he majored in business administration and had experience from many different part-time jobs. The business books that Joey had studied appeared. He continued, "To start a business, I learned business via the internet and sometimes read a few related books. Now I find them very useful." The sun gradually appeared from behind the clouds above the porch. Joey stood in front of the crowd and said loudly, "Welcome everyone to become a member of the workshop. Because we have to get used to work, for the time being, everyone must be present in the morning." Joey handed the paper to the crowd and said, "This is the contract. First, those chosen to burn coal gather here." Joey added, "Those who are literate can read it immediately. Those who don't understand can just listen to my explanation. Anyone who is literate, please confirm the contents." The group of people holding the papers in their hands did not understand anything. Joey spoke up and said, "As I said, the salary of a coal burner is 8 liters a day. If you work overtime, you will receive an additional allowance, and 2 liters per hour." The crowd below was buzzing. "Overtime allowance? What is that?" Joey smiled and replied, "It's extra pay." One person below suddenly said, "After working for so long, this is the first time I've heard about extra pay." The person next to him replied, "1 hour. Now I get paid 2 more coins." Joey continued, "And if you want, you will get 1 day off every 7 days. Then you will receive a holiday allowance. The holiday allowance will be 6 liters." The group of people were surprised. One person said, "A day off?" The person next to him was also surprised. "A day off allowance?" Joey winked and said, "Even if you take a break, you will still get paid. Having a comfortable rest is very important to the blacksmithing ward. You have to rest to maintain your physical strength. That way you can work hard the next day." The crowd was extremely surprised and excited. "If you take a break, you still get paid? You don't work but you still get paid?" Joey laughed and said, "You don't need to be too surprised, there's still money. There are also rewards based on work performance. If a person produces more than 30 coal bars a day, he or she will receive an additional bonus. Joey continued, so if someone works hard, they can receive 12 bronze coins a day. The crowd shouted in surprise, 10, 12 van money, oh my god. Joey walked up to a person and raised 2 fingers and said, here there will also be holidays, not just a week off once a month. You get 1 day off, if you still go to work on a day off. Will receive 2 times the normal salary. That person was surprised and speechless. Joey kept saying, about the generous benefits including annual leave, if you work all year, work hard and don't make any big mistakes. You will have an additional 5 days off and still receive pay for those 5 days. Of course, if you don't want to, you can still work on these days off. And of course, wages will also be calculated twice as much as usual. The crowd was extremely excited and shouted, no way. A group of people in coin shops appeared. Joey thought, nothing surprising. The people below listened in amazement. Joey continued thinking, because this is a product of capitalism created after many mistakes and failures. Joey said, of course all the people working in other stages will also benefit same regime after signing the contract. Instead, Joey raised his finger firmly and added, absolutely. You are not allowed to reveal anything in the forging ward to the outside. Even your family members are not allowed to talk. If you violate it, you will immediately be fired unconditionally. You just need to investigate and you'll know right away. There are many people willing to work here. The crowd immediately decided to shout loudly. We absolutely won't say anything. Don't worry, we will definitely not open our mouths. Quickly give us the job. Job. We want to work from now on. Joey raised his hand to Josun and said, there are also those who burn coal with me. The rest are here for my father to assign. Joey smiled brightly and added, of course, is that there is no need to worry about the salary issue. Just study and you will receive a salary. The group of people excitedly shouted in unison. We understand because we will try our best because of the Iron Guild. What can we do? Is there any place that pays wages like that? Joey followed behind the crowd, smiling cunningly. Image of people working very hard inside the blacksmith's workshop. One person shouted loudly, I told you the windmill must not stop. I told you not to burn coal like that. Josun angrily scolded. If I turn my face away because of the heat, will it work? Heat, you have to use your whole body to feel this heat. The young man bowed his head and replied, I know. Josun angrily scolded, if you turn away because of the heat, will it work? Heat, you have to use your whole body to feel this heat. The young man bowed his head and replied, I know. Josun shouted angrily with red eyes, knocking unconsciously like that will only make more noise. I told you that's not right. Every time I use different strength to hit the hammer, I hit the exact same spot with the same force. Force? The young man shouted in panic, I will remember. Josun continued to scold him. How many times do I have to say this to understand? The young man fearfully replied, we will work hard. Josun suddenly changed his attitude and said, good. The focus of casting is to turn the necessary shape into the smallest amount of molding. Boldly omitting the handle in the casting frame was a correct judgment. And you just need to use wood, that's all. Ochul, you really teach me everything. Ochul shyly scratched his head, you're too praising. Joey stood from afar looking back and smiled, thinking, it's true that position makes a person. Joey walked over and said, Father. Give me some time, Josun immediately said, hit the right place, what's the matter? So? Joey immediately said, now everyone seems to be good at what they do, maybe we should start a business. Josun, annoyed, turned around and said, unbelievable with this kind of strength. What to produce, the quality of the ward. Iron crafting cannot be of such poor quality, Joey nervously replied, haven't I told you many times, originally all you need is a quality paint layer. Josun angrily shouted, paint huh? Afraid, with their strength, it's impossible. Joey sighed and said loudly, you know their salary, right? It's been 20 days. Are you planning to use all 1,000 taels on salary? Josun gritted his teeth. Joey continued worriedly. We've also paid off Yom Wang Chai's debt. If we deduct the price of alcohol, we can only last about 10 more days. The wages of the workers, our food and living expenses are really no joke. You have to be really decisive now. Josun raised 4 fingers and shouted loudly, 4 days. Just give me 4 more days, in the meantime I will imitate the artisans. Joey immediately said, "Father said that a few days ago. Now is really the last time." Jo-sun walked away replied, "I know." The green trees under the blue sky. 4 days later at Joey's smithy. The workers are working hard. One is standing in front of a burning fire. The other is carrying a bucket of red coal. On the other side, one person is blowing fire next to another stove. The remaining two are working, carefully pouring hot lava into the mold. On one side, two other people were using hammers to hit the iron bar below. Jo-sun thought to himself, "The effect is amazing." Jo-sun looked over and couldn't believe it. Looking in horror, thinking, how did he come up with this? Joey stood in front with a very satisfied expression. Jo-sun suddenly thought about the things he had done, from cutting wood to standing in front of the stove. The fire is hot, it's time to adjust the fire so it's just right, then it's time to use a hammer to hit the iron bar. Jo-sun couldn't believe it and thought to himself, all my life I've done all these things, even if I endure the pain of the body to do. Cast coal and tempered grass, yet it only took 4 days to make a large iron plow. Two workers carrying a large iron plow said in unison, "It's finished." Joey used a hammer to tap on the iron plow and said happily, "It looks okay." Jo-sun behind him silently said, "Damn it," Joey asked in surprise. "Yes?" Jo-sun clenched his fists, tears fell, angrily said, "Give me back 40 years. Joey did not understand what was going on and said, "What are you saying?" Jo-sun cried with tears in his eyes. If there is a way, you should tell me soon." Joey laughed loudly and replied, "The best way is usually thought of last, but now it's quite late." Jo-sun was helpless and kept crying. Joey said, "Late is just too late." Jo-sun continuously lamented in pain. "How much hard work I had to do." Joey immediately avoided asking, "But don't you see something empty?" Jo-sun stopped crying, looked over and replied, "That's right, so the foundry people are hanging out." Joey then said, "Yes, we should quickly buy a few more hammers, so the number of people practicing will also increase." Jo-sun next to him smiled. The iron plows gradually appeared. That day when taking turns operating the iron ward produced 22 iron plows, until 100 iron plows were also produced. No more than 4 days. Half a year passed like that. At Joey's iron factory, an extremely large number of workers are competing to work very efficiently. The sunlight shines into the middle of Joey's yard. The sunlight shines into the inside of the house. Joey is arranging shoes on shelves. Joey with a neat, luxurious outfit proudly looked at the shoe cabinet and said, "This. I don't have to be jealous of anyone anymore." A person walked in room. Joey immediately said, "Come in quickly, Lee General Manager." The General Manager of the Iron Manufacturing Ward, Lee Yeosong walked in and said, "Ward Master, these are the things that need to be approved today." Joey took the paper, filled with words saying, "As expected today's results at Daisen Building are still the best." Lee Yeosong immediately bowed his head and replied, "The majority of the iron department are trying their best. But Sozin construction workers still lack many skills." Joey said with a serious face, "Skills are one thing. But it's a mental problem. The people at DEASAN still need to pay more money. Please encourage the workers at Sozin building a little more." Image of workers renovating the house. Joey thought, "I have reformed the manufacturing ward into 3 levels, others prepare other tools." Joey continued thinking, Daisen Building is a place that produces large iron products, such as iron plows, iron gates, iron columns. Joey thought, Sozin Building is a place that produces small iron agricultural tools such as shovels, sickles, hoes, iron bar grooves, and is a place for new recruits. Kizan Construction is a newly established and invested division to produce higher technology products such as safes, locks, vehicles, horses, lanterns, and iron wheels. Lee Yeosong spoke up. "I'll take care of this. Oh, and also." Joey asked in surprise, "Is there something else going on?" Lee Yeosong immediately replied, "A guest has come to you." Joey smiled and said, "My brother has arrived? Are you waiting in the living room?" Lee Yeosong nodded and smiled and replied, "He came 2 hours ago. He said he would wait until you finished your work." Joey ran away in panic. "Then you have to tell me quickly." The leaves fell outside the house. Lee Janjae was lifting the cup of tea and looking over. Joey came over and happily called out, "Jiang, brother." Li Jianjie also happily smiled and replied, "My brother." Joey smiled and said, "I still feel nauseous after drinking it. I've been drinking with you since 3 days ago, are you planning to come see me again?" Li Jianjie replied, "There's no such thing. This brother's stomach is just like yours. I just came by to. Let's say hello before we go back." Joey sat down and smiled and said, "I like that pretend strong look." Li Jianjie then changed his tired face and said, "The owner of that house just doesn't suit me, next time I'll definitely do it. We'll win." Joey proudly raised his hand and said, "Will you quickly give me the money you promised?" Li Jianjie angrily put his hand in his pocket. Li Jianjie immediately said, "Winner or loser is still not determined yet. It's not over yet, so there's nothing good, but you just call me Jeongjae brother. Jeongjae brother. Who is that?" Joey cunningly replied, holding the bag of money in his hand, "It's like that." Li Jianjie was confused, looking at Joey who was taking out the silver bars. The afternoon sunlight illuminating the falling leaves looming outside the premises. Li Jianjie asked, "Okay, so the guardian issue hasn't been decided yet?" Joey immediately replied, "Yes. I will think more and report back to you later." Li Jianjie worried, "It's good to handle it carefully, but there's no time left. Blocking it with the fire dragon spear's arrow, there are limits to the union." Li Jianjie continued, "No matter how much you care about security, now no one knows that cheap iron products on the market are fake." "Of the iron crafting ward?" Joey was surprised, "So fast?" Li Jianjie continued, "The entire Anhui city has been circulating your things for half a year. No matter how careful I am, there are hundreds of Danbo carts traveling between me and you, so if you're not an idiot, then there's no reason why I wouldn't know that the iron products sold by the merchant company are yours." Joey pondered. Li Jianjie's eyes became sharp and added, "Moreover, just by looking at the main door of the iron workshop, they can guess the success of the iron workshop in the past. If the officials come and calculate your iron and steel problem, what will happen?" Li Jianjie said with a serious face, "The iron workshop disappeared without a trace, leaving only a problem. It's just a matter of time. Of course, the person who provided you with iron will also have difficulties." Joey still calmly smiled and replied, "Nothing has happened in the past time though." Li Jianjie was upset. "I said loudly, is it because I'm naive or deliberately pretending not to know? Up until now I've only paid attention to the Fire Dragon Company, and that's about to reach its limit. You don't know how old those officials are." Joey took out the notebook from his shirt and smiled and replied, "You just need to stop it like now." Joey said, "Let's see." Li Jianjie saw it and gritted his teeth, thinking. He pulled out that book again. Joey looked at the book and smiled and said, "It's true that there are rumors like you said. A few days ago I also came Great Merchant Group, ah. That's right, yesterday, the friendly trade group somehow knew that I had a hobby of collecting shoes and gave them silk shoes as gifts." Joey's expression gradually became cunning and he continued, "Moreover, the conditions are good. I proposed to do business with this party. Of course that place is not the same. Right, maybe it will prevent outside pressure like you." Li Jianjie snatched the notebook from Joey's hand, angrily said, "This person." Li Jianjie slammed the notebook on the table and shouted loudly, "How can the relationship between people be bound only by interests, feelings, emotions?" Li Jianjie continued with a sigh of relief, "It's no longer possible for you to hide under my shadow. It won't be long. The problem is not just on the part of the mandarins. It's been more than a month since the ward's merchants were about to protest in front of the trade union." Li Jianjie pointed at Joey with a solemn face and said in a serious voice, "They will soon flock to you, that's it. They bet their lives." Joey's eyes turned cold and cunning and replied, "If it was that problem, I had already thought about it." Li Jianjie asked in surprise, "What else?" Joey smiled complacently and replied, "Just wait and see." Li Jianjie leaned back in his chair and said, "Let's solve the iron problem as soon as possible. It would be best if we directly followed Dai Nian Fuang, but Dai Nian Fuang won't protect an iron guild. Must find something that connects with that person as soon as possible." Joey raised the cup of tea to his mouth and asked indifferently, "What do you think is my monthly profit when operating the iron workshop?" Quote, Li Jianjie immediately replied, I don't know, Zhou continued. It's about 600 taels of silver equivalent to 60 taels of gold. Li Jianjie heard this and thought in surprise, 60 taels of gold. Even at its peak, my trading company didn't necessarily earn that much. Zhou smiled cunningly and said, all official matters are paid in regular installments, which is equivalent to bribery, brother. I'm not afraid of the mandarins. Zhou's eyes gradually turned cold and he continued, but what I'm most afraid of is that they're trying to eat up this iron guild. A man was riding a horse standing on a hill looking down on a green plain with strong winds blowing. Zhou continued to say, people who fear even officials. People who are free within the framework of the law to achieve a group's interests, following a policy of brutal force regardless of everything. People who thoroughly hide their grievances and clearly distinguish between enemy and enemy. Li Jianjie clenched his fists and replied, it's the gangsters. Zhou put his finger down on the teacup. You're right, so I've made up my mind. Zhou dipping his finger into the teacup and then pulling it out. Zhou then used the water remaining on his finger to draw on the table. Zhou smirked, his eyes seemed to be burning with fire. He said, a group that fills the royal titles with the clans for the bad guys are places where just hearing their name is enough to make them afraid. The leaders of the 5 great families and always bring good swordsmen from the streets to be their own swordsmen. Li Jianjie heard it and said in surprise, I can't do it. A phrase written in water appeared on the table. Zhou replied, yes. Zhou shook the remaining drops of water from his hand. With a powerful look on his face, he said solemnly, I want to take the king of Anhui city as my guardian. Image of a person holding a sword raised high, standing in front of a crowd of people standing behind him. Nam Kung, Dai Nam Kung family, great swordsman, unique. The government of the world, Trung Nguyen is a great sword. The chair fell down and hit the ground really hard. Li Jianjie was terrified and couldn't believe what he just heard, trembling and asked, my brother, is this possible? Quote, a few days ago, the prosperous ancient town was illuminated by sunlight. In the center of Zhongbong district, Anhui city, a group of people were standing in the middle of the yard. Zhou walked up and asked an old man, is there something here? That person immediately pointed in the other direction and said, I heard there's a fight going on at the castle. A young man holding a sword said aggressively, don't you understand human language? So let's fight to see who should stay in this castle. Zhou suddenly opened his eyes wide and thought, did they really fight? That guy immediately ran forward, the other person also stomped his feet and flew back. 2 people aggressively attacked each other, one held a sword to slash, the other used a sword to block. Attack. The man holding the peach shouted, swinging his sword back at the other person. The man holding the sword smiled triumphantly and quickly rushed to dodge the attack. Zhou saw the scene before his eyes, then he opened his mouth in surprise and said loudly, what expert is that person? 2 people standing there were also chatting. One person said, the person holding the sword is a local martial artist. Famous as Haoyingman, but not a master. The person next to him replied. The person holding that sword also belongs to the private sect called Tu Kiem Hua, but not to the level of being called a master. Tu Kiem Hua used his feet to fly straight into the air. Zhou was surprised and thought, is that still not an expert? Haoyingman swung the sword. Tu Kiem Hua raised his sword back in the air, preparing to attack. Tu Kiem Hua smiled cunningly and slashed down at Haoyingman. Haoyingman quickly dodged the attack using force. The person behind Tu Kiem Hoa's sword. Tu Kiem Hoa's sword suddenly turned and rushed back. The tip of the sword pointed straight towards Haoyingman's face, his eyes widened in horror. Suddenly a stone flew straight and hit the sword. The sword was deflected away from Haoyingman's face. Tu Kiem Hua gritting his teeth, he looked back. Tu Kiem Hua landed on the ground, held his sword out in front of him and shouted angrily, who are you? A person stepped forward and spoke, I just took my eyes off this group of people and they crawled out in numbers like snakes. A young man with an imposing appearance and cold eyes appeared and said in a serious voice, these insects go away quickly. Tu Kiem Hua and Haoyingman were scared. The 2 immediately rushed away, disappearing in front of the young man. Zhou opened his mouth hesitantly. Zhou was extremely surprised and opened his eyes and mouth wide in admiration and shouted loudly, So cool, Joey thought. After that day I was determined to bet everything on the Nam Kung family. Back to the present at Joey's house. Joey and Lee Janjae sat across from each other. Joey asked, "Do you remember the first day? Did you come to visit me?" Lee Janjae smiled and replied, "How could I forget?" Joey then replied, "Yes, that was also unbelievable for me. In fact there's nothing I can do for you, only an oath, but you've given me money." Lee Janjae smiled and replied, "If I come back at that time, I will give you 10,000 taels, not 1,000 taels." Joey continued, "This time I will also try to venture into Nam Kung the Jia, at worst I will lose my money." "Would I have lost my life?" Lee Janjae nodded and replied, "That's right, aren't you the owner of the Iron Guild without any money? If the job goes well and you successfully find a guardian, don't forget this brother." Quote. Joey playfully joked, "Can't you just say no?" Lee Janjae replied with a gloomy face, "This person." Lee Janjae stood up and said, "I probably have to go. If something happens then I must send me a letter." Joey walked Lee Janjae to the door, clasped his hands in front, bowed and said, "Well, have a safe journey." Lee Janjae smiled and replied, "Thank you, my friend." Joey went back inside. General Manager Lee bent down and said, "Ward Master, your father is looking for you." Joey was surprised, "My father?" At the palace. Joey is sitting right away briefly in the study room thinking, "Why is he suddenly telling me to straighten my clothes?" A person opened the door and walked in. Joey raised his head and said, "Father." Jo-sun held a purple box in his hand and said, "Just sit down." Joey immediately said, "Yes." Jo-sun calmly sat down. Joey worriedly stood up and asked, "Something suddenly happened. What's wrong, Dad?" Jo-sun put the box on the floor and said, "I don't know when this thing was passed down in our family. I guess it was probably from the generation of founder Sao Man Duck. But that's just the ancestors' speculation." Jo-sun continued seriously. However, the ancestors left a family statement to convey this to the person who will represent the family generation of the era that, and today I will pass it on to you. Jo-sun added, "No matter what anyone says, you are the one who rebuilt our family. You are the right person to lead this generation." Joey replied in surprise, "Dad, why are you talking so sadly? It's all because of you." Jo-sun slapped his hand on the box on the ground. Jo-sun shouted loudly, "Jo-sun, the 20th grandson of the family, pass on the Gi-thean blood jade to the second son, the representative of the Cho family." Joey thought in surprise, "Wait." Joey remembered re-watching the scene of a middle-aged man putting a necklace on a man's body. He thought, "Where have I seen this scene before? In my previous life? My dad also gave me a ruby necklace like this." Joey immediately opened the box. A ruby necklace appeared inside the box. Joey was surprised. Jo-sun immediately said, "Always keep it in your body, until it is passed on to the person who will lead the family to the next generation, which is the mission of the person who received the Gi-thean blood jade." Joey was surprised and did not speak make a profit. The image of Joey in this life stands side by side with Joey in the modern era. Joey thought to himself, if so, this Nia-thean blood jade is the treasure of the Jo family. If it were present in my house, I would have reincarnated. On Ancestors. A long time ago? The sparkling blood pearl. Suddenly the blood jade radiated a mysterious source of energy. From inside it appeared strange voices. "This luck. This is like a descendant who has gone through Nia-thean Kiem, isn't that so, father?" Another voice immediately replied, "It's true that Nia-thean's aura, with this aura, isn't he already a noble person?" The other person replied, "That's right, this guy is truly a venerable." The Kia said, "There is no doubt. What extraordinary creation is this? Is this possible?" The other person immediately replied, "How can the venerable exist in real life? If he has gone through life and death and samsara, he must be imprisoned in the blood of jade." Joey was extremely frightened, shouted, "Mom!" Jo-sun asked in surprise, "What's wrong with you?" Joey was so scared that he fell back and stammered, "The blood jade can talk." The power of the blood jade radiated. The voice rang out again, Did you hear what we said?" Another voice suddenly said, "Why is this happening? If so, we can talk to that descendant." Another voice said, "Indeed, a genius is a genius." Jo-sun stood up and smiled and said, "I also had a strange dream when I saw blood jade." Because it is not a normal object. Always keep your soul pure, Joey immediately replied. Yes. Yes. Jo-sun walked out, closed the door. Joey sat in the study thinking. A sparkling blood gem full of mysteries inside. A mysterious figure with red eyes shouted, "Quiet, what's your name?" Joey from outside immediately replied, "I'm Joey, I'm fine, so everyone just speak naturally." The figure then said seriously, "It's okay, you hearing our voices means your soul status is equivalent to our venerables. But how come I don't see the rope coming from you?" Joey asked curiously, "A rope? What is that?" Joey's naked body floated in the air, ahead was a beam of light. A voice said, "After receiving the great ability in accordance with the choice and grace of Neathene Blood Jade, immediately after that you will receive the link with the Blood Jade. That is, linked together by a strain, when that person's life finally ends, the soul will belong to the arms of the Blood Jade, but I don't see such a string for you." Joey surprised, "Blessed by the Blood Jade, receive a special ability?" The human figure in the Blood Jade then said yes. Normally you should receive a certain ability, other than that there is no way. Can explain how your soul is equal to yours. Joey then asked, "That great ability? What ability are you talking about?" The image of a swordsman appeared. The person in Blood Jade said, "It depends on what you want. If you want to learn martial arts, you will receive a unified body of heaven and man. Even an ant cannot fool you." Quote. Next is the image of a poet holding a pen. That person continues, "If you choose to hold a pen, you can receive a divine brain." Followed by a heroic general on the battlefield field. That person continued, "If you dream of becoming a king, you will have patience and be able to summon everyone in the world." Finally a magician with a golden talisman in his hand. The Blood Jade continued, "If you are a spiritual practitioner, you will become a spiritually enlightened person." Joey wondered, "I have never received such grace," in Joey's heart. I thought to myself, if there is such a thing, do I need to work so hard to build an iron manufacturing guild? The voice in the blood gem spoke again, "What?" The figure in Blood Jade angrily questioned, "Don't hide it, you've definitely taken something from Neathene Blood Jade, there's no other way but that. To explain the dignity of your soul." Joey was surprised. Joey remembered the time he was hit by a car and grabbed the necklace with the blood gem. He thought, is it true that something strange happened to me after my accident and death that I returned to the past and lived Joey's life? The image of Joey waking up in bed appeared. Joey thought, could that be caused by Neathene Blood Jade? Joey gritted his teeth and opened his eyes wide thinking, and can I tell them the truth that I was reincarnated? Joey leaned over to the box on the ground and said, to be honest, I experienced something strange, but I don't know if it was because of the Blood Jade or not, and it's the secret of my life, so I see very scared. Blood Jade's illusion said, it turns out you can't trust us. We are your ancient ancestors, you are just our descendants, nothing more and nothing less. The illusion continued, moreover we all exist only in spirit, with no ability to exercise power in the material world, nor any intention to do so. We can cause harm. What can I do for you? Joey couldn't believe his ears and asked, are you guys really my ancestors? The illusion of that person, along with the souls of other people, appeared. The illusionist said, that's right. Neathene Blood Jade was only passed down to the Joe family lineage. Aren't you the representative responsible for the Joe family in this era? So how can we have any ill will towards you? Joey gritted his teeth thinking. Joey firmly said, I have reincarnated. The souls inside the Blood Jade suddenly panicked, clamoring, reincarnated, it's impossible. Patriarch, the soul of the master, suddenly laughed loudly. A stream of power radiated out, engulfing everything in the Blood Jade. He laughed loudly and said, why not me? In the end, heaven did not allow me to reverse it. The illusory figure suddenly gradually disappeared. In the process of disappearing, the illusory soul continued to laugh and say loudly, I will only remain as a memory like a small fish. Seema, you win. Okay. The figure of that person gradually disappeared, but the laughter still echoed. The space in the study room suddenly became quiet. Only the Blood Jade necklace remained in the box. It no longer emitted any light anymore. Joey outside didn't understand what was going on. He called out, ancestors. Joey reached for the Blood Jade string in the box. Joey picked up the box, still not understanding what was going on, sighed and whispered, what is this? Suddenly there were noises coming from outside into the room. The study door suddenly opened wide. Ji-hee appeared breathing heavily and excitedly said loudly, "I will go to Nam Kung the Jia with you." Joey looked at Ji-hee, who was very excited. Ji-wee's eyes could not hide the excitement, but were bright. Joey was serious. Took replied, no. Ji-hee in the back put his hands together and begged, "My dear brother." Joey in front firmly said, "I won't fall in love because you did that." Ji-hee still didn't give up and repeatedly said loudly, "I absolutely won't say anything. Just let me stand next to you. I just want to see them once." Joey still firmly refused. "No." Ji-hee knelt down and said, "Little brother." "No brother." Joey turned around and said they came to ask his father to forge the true sword. Ji-hee was surprised about what the true sword was. Ji-hee knelt on the ground and begged, "Even if I have 10 swords, I will still stand still and not move. Please. Nam Kung the Jia." Joey was annoyed. "No is nothing." Ji-hee felt sorry for himself. Tears welling up. At this moment Jo-sun walked in and said, "Your brother won't say anything, so let him come with you." Joey asked in surprise, "It's okay? Even is your father the same?" Jo-sun smiled and replied, "You two are brothers, don't shoulder everything alone, after all, I'm your older brother." Joey hesitated, thinking in his heart, but this guy still hasn't fulfilled his duties as a son. Jo-sun smiled and said, "I will never ask you for things like this again, so please give in for once." Joey turned back and sighed and asked, "You really won't say anything, right?" Ji-hee shouted firmly, "Of course, people who practice martial arts are honest, I'm a calm person." Joey sighed helplessly and replied, "We'll leave in a few days, you're ready to go." "Go away." Ji-hee was excited. "It's great, just leave it to me, I will prepare all the necessary things." At Joey's house, a person hurriedly ran up and shouted, "There's a big problem in the ward, master." Joey asked in surprise, "What's going on?" That person was very panicked and shouted loudly, "There are many people coming to our iron ward, they are also carrying weapons." Joey's eyes were cold and surprised and said, "Weapons?" Quote, loud screams echoed from outside, "You bastards! I will kill all of you." A group of men holding weapons aggressively kicked in the door. One person shouted, "Kill all the people of the regime. Let's do it." Joey with a determined look on his face, thinking, whatever has to happen will come. Joey majestically shouted, "I am Joey, the owner of this iron workshop." The crowd saw Joey and shouted even more angrily, "Are you here? Luckily I met you. I will tear the mold with my own hands." "That dirty face of yours, is that you? Are you the one who doesn't know that? Damn, why are you still being polite now, you shameless thick-faced bastard?" Joey did not understand what was going on and calmly asked, "I still don't know what I did wrong to you guys." Someone in the crowd angrily shouted, "Businessmen also have business ethics." Joey smiled and said, "A merchant?" That guy gritted his teeth and said, "This guy?" Joey calmly stood in front of the crowd and said, "I just asked one question." Joey walked past the group of people who had just left, said in a serious voice, "Even if you sell cheaper than my iron workshop, you still can't surpass me. Can you not lower the price and still maintain business?" The group suddenly looked at each other and thought. Joey looked at the crowd and thought, of course not, because most of these people are owners of small iron guilds. Joey walked in front of the crowd and turned around and said, "Follow me, I will give everyone, visit my iron factory." The group looked at each other not knowing what to say. The previously aggressive group obediently followed Joey. The door opened, 2 people in the group were immediately frightened, mouths open. Inside are thousands of workers working hard. The crowd was buzzing, "Oh my god! How many anvils are there? So many people, how many blacksmiths are there?" A long row of iron plows arranged neatly. One person exclaimed, "This is crazy, it's impossible." Joey with his cold, red eyes said sternly, "Can you all win against me?" The crowd immediately became gloomy. Joey angrily raised his hand and shouted, "When will everyone realize that they are being oppressed by 4 big iron guilds? When will there be an iron guild in Anhui that is known as the best iron guild in the world? Why is our Anhui Iron Guild inferior to Sichuan?" The crowd immediately nodded. One person replied, "That's right." The person next to him also said, "That's true." Joey with a fiery spirit shouted at the top of his lungs. In the last 100 years Anhui, have we received any orders from the royal family? The royal family only chooses the children of this land of Anhui. Just being soldiers, we Anhui don't deserve to be ignored by the royal family like that. Do you think that's right? Joey raised his finger and continued, moreover, do you know what we Anhui have? Who made the legendary sword and dragon sword? One person excitedly said, that's right, we are the descendants of legendary blacksmiths. The person next to them smiled triumphantly and replied, iron is just inanimate minerals. The crowd immediately shouted firmly, Your Majesty is really too much. You don't know how to use our talents, we must rise up. Joey clasped his hands together and used his majestic strength to shout, please help me realize that dream. The crowd was surprised. Help make the dream come true. What the hell is he talking about? Joey clenched his fists and shouted loudly, if we Anhui want to win against Sichuan, we must overwhelm them in terms of numbers and tools made from Anhui's iron. We'll be present everywhere across the country. If we operate the small iron guilds together we can win Sichuan, so we all have to work together. Joey gave reaching out to the workers who were working hard. He said, please be their guide, use the experience you have accumulated for so long to contribute to this victory. Now everyone doesn't have to personally do everything in the blacksmith shop anymore. Joey turned to Josun and called his father, come here. Joey raised his hand towards Josun and said loudly, this is the person who created this iron guild. Now he alone is directing everything in this iron guild. I want to invite all the elders to come here to open their own iron guild. Joey with an excited face continued, everyone's salary will be 10 taels of silver. In addition, each person will receive their own reward depending on capacity. Of course, I will buy all the inventory and supplies in your blacksmith shop at a high price. Joey looked at the confused crowd and said loudly, will you help me? Joey clap your hands and turned to tell the courtiers, bring what I have prepared here. Two people were carrying something quite large. Joey walked over and opened the veil. He said, you guys, this represents my determination. The sign was engraved with 4 words, Anhui Iron Ward. Appeared. Joey stood in front of the crowd and loudly said, Anhui Iron Ward, if you all agree to come and work for me, then you would have created the name Anhui Iron Ward. The crowd immediately shouted excitedly. Loudly, I agree. Great. We will make Anhui Iron Guild the best in the world. Joey turned to Josun and said, Father, please explain to everyone present here. Okay. Josun turned back and replied, I know. Joey turned around and smiled triumphantly. Joey's face became decisive with the smile of a victor thinking, this is the art of speaking to persuade the opponent. Joey went inside. General Manager Lee was waiting inside. Joey turned to call, General Manager Lee. General Manager Lee immediately bowed his head and replied, yes sir. Joey immediately said, please arrange a half to KY Sun. General Manager Lee immediately replied, if it's KY Sun, is the ward owner trying to improve that carriage? Joey smiled and said, that's right. A horse carriage with 2 large wheels appeared. Joey said, it's time to make a new comfortable horse carriage at a reasonable price that Trung Nguyen has never had before. The image of the ancient carriage is more modern innovation with a horse in front. Joey continued, if we bring it to market, it will be a real revolution. We will hold the entire Trung Nguyen carriage market in our hands. General Manager Lee bowed his head and replied, I only admire the ability of the guild master. Joey breathed a sigh of relief and asked, it's total. Today's expenses yet? Please prepare fully. General Manager Lee immediately replied, I have prepared everything. Joey smiled and thought to himself, I have indeed chosen a talented person in business. General Manager Lee suddenly asked, can I ask how long it will take? Joey turned back and replied, I can't say how long it will take. Before I reach my goal I won't come back. This is a long road with an unknown destination date. General Manager Lee worried, so if there's something important that needs to be decided, I can't delay it until the ward master returns. Joey then said, there is a book that records a few things that I predicted will happen. You can refer to it. General Manager Lee replied, I will handle everything according to the instructions of the ward master. Transition of the sun gradually emerging from behind the high hills. The light of the sun shining down on the undulating mountains with green trees. Two people, Joey and Jihi, are riding horses on the clear road forest. Joey sat on the horse and thought, now I'm more used to riding a horse, but there are still times when I want to fall off the horse's back. Joey looked at Jihi, who was riding a horse and reading a book. He thought to himself, I didn't expect that guy to ride a horse so well. Joey looked at the book Jihi was holding and thought, that seems to be Jiang Ho Fong Ban Lo. I heard that this is a book recording the 1,000-year history of martial arts. Quote. Joey turned around and asked, is that very interesting? Jihi, still intently reading the book, replied, yeah. Joey sighed helplessly, thinking to himself, oh my god, please destroy that guy's martial arts dreams. Go? Jihi looked in Joey's direction and frowned. Jihi closed the book and asked, are you secretly cursing me now? Joey was startled when he heard it. Jihi continued, even though I'm you, I can't do anything for you. That's why all this time you haven't been able to see the real me. Jihi frowned and continued, to be honest, I still can't believe that you are my biological brother Joey, my younger brother. Not that smart. When Joey heard it, he suddenly fell silent. The horse's footsteps continued to move. Jihi continued to speak, you persuaded the old blacksmiths in other blacksmith guilds. You are like a monster from another world. Among the people I know, there is no one as good at speaking as you. The sunlight shined down. Jihi looked up at the sky and continued, but that doesn't mean that because you are so excellent, I will live a carefree life. Joey looked at Jihi in surprise and thought, what is that? Why are you suddenly so serious and trustworthy? Joey looked at Jihi and thought, well, come to think of it. Joey looked down at Jiwi's body. Continued to look at Jiwi's arm full of scars. Joey thought, all this time I thought he was always imitating in novels. Joey said, it turns out you've also cultivated yourself a lot. Jihi looked at Joey. Then Jihi turned his eyes back and said in a deep voice, if you swing a sword you can forget a lot of things. The bright sunlight shined through the green trees. Jihi asked, do you remember that year of bad harvest? Joey replied silently, are you talking about 15 years ago? That year there was a severe crop failure. Was the government's food aid stolen by bandits? The previous scenario appeared in Jiwi's mind. Jihi stood inside the house looking at Josun being beaten. Jihi said, father was beaten to a pulp by bandits. Do you know what I thought at that time? Returning to reality, Jihi clenched his fists and said with determination, at that time I only wished that I could protect my father and younger brother. I will not let anyone in my family be harmed by someone else. Fight again. Joey heard those words and was very surprised. Joey smiled. Joey punched Jiwi's shoulder and said, you can definitely do it. Jihi suddenly quickly brushed Joey's hand away and said, let it go. Let it go. Oh my god, Joey laughed happily. Rows of green trees in the green forest located at the foot of the hill. A circle of light suddenly appeared. The blood jade radiated energy, a bright light appeared. A strange voice spoke with an extremely cunning laugh. A bastard covered his mouth with his tongue. Eyes of the world. Two Joey people riding horses on the forest path. Voices continuously spoke, descendants of the great Zhou family can only establish one guild. Alas, just looking at it I'm tired. But it's better than his father, every time I think about him I feel crazy. Joey was annoyed, the voices continued to echo. It's true he's the same, not better that guy. Joey gritted his teeth and thought, what you leave behind for your children and grandchildren is this. There's no treasure, there's a lot of gossip. The souls in the blood jade were in an uproar. What is that? This bad word sounds like a curse. Jewels? Mr. Illusion angrily said loudly, boy, do you know how precious the Neathene blood jade is? Right? The blood gem suddenly glowed, radiating the anger of the illusions inside. Joey was surprised and thought, can you even read my thoughts? The illusionary souls immediately replied, what should I say? Your soul is already in my territory, although the blood jade's thread has not yet been connected. But I only recently learned about that soul and it has been tied to Neathene's wheel of rotation. The illusory soul continued, so the spiritual connection is also obvious. Joey heard it, silent and said nothing. Joey's eyes firmly asked silently, there are 8 people in total, right? The illusory soul smiled cunningly and replied, it's true that your mind is also smart. Can you distinguish our voices so quickly? Joey communicated with the souls using thinking. No. What does this mean? Usually you only need to listen a few times to realize it. A soul replied, but you kid don't know how smart you are. Do Joey remembers when he was still in modern times, he thought, smart? Who knew I had been praised for being a good speaker and having a good memory, but this is the first time I've been praised for being smart bright. If you're really smart, you only need to take the exam once to pass the civil service exam. The illusory souls continued to laugh and say, it seems like you think the fact that your soul's core has improved is joke, but only with soul powers. It's impossible to explain his intelligence. Perhaps it's a characteristic that only reincarnated people have. The image of Joey's smithy appeared. The souls continued to discuss. That's right, even the things he applied in his ward were the same. Clearly not something that belongs to this world. Yes, I am also very surprised about that. The master gradually revealed his identity and was no longer like other illusory souls. He said softly, he is not a suitable person to become the successor to Manduck. Joey heard this and was surprised and thought, Manduck? Could it be Cao Cao in Romance of the Three Kingdoms? Is the Zhou family's ancestor Cao Cao? Master Manduck coldly replied, I am your ancestor. The myth of the Cao family has existed for a long time. It is just a secondary. I was once the adopted son of a eunuch who raised me to be a different person. Joey thinks, Overlord. An illusory soul spoke up, but after all, it's still better than other juniors. Master Manduck frowned and replied, he's just a benefactor. How can someone like that deserve to be king? Quote. Joey angrily questioned, oh well. If you pay them money, they call it that. Otherwise what do you do? Are you calling them slaves or hypnotizing them to make them call them that? The illusory souls immediately said indignantly, damn, to talk to our ancestors like that? Joey immediately replied, but I said that. It's not wrong. The illusory souls still continued to stir, insolent. So noisy. Suddenly Jihe laughed loudly and said, yes, who exactly is the sword god? Joey turned in surprise. What? Jihe excitedly turned around and replied, this is crazy, it's hard to believe. The image of a person stretching his sword passed, sending away a series of people. Jihe continued to say, defeat the spear by yourself. The 8th generation master of the dark magic cult, that young man used a sword to cut off a person's head in an instant. Jihe said, it only takes one time to cut off the leader's neck. Joey wondered, the dark demon sect? Jihe happily replied, the current demon city is their descendant. Joey immediately replied, ah. Joey thought, Thien Ma Tin is the strongest place in the 3 hegemons of the evil sect, including Thien Ma Tan, Black Thien Lotus, Sichuan Hoi. Did he personally destroy the sect that created such a powerful organization? Could he really do that? Image of a tall young man with a majestic appearance holding a large sword. Jihe said, in history, no martial artist has ever been able to do this, only the nickname Sword God was left behind. Well, that person's name won't be saved. Because he had a family, what he left behind for his children or what happened at the end of his life is all unclear. There is only one anecdote whose truth is unknown. Jihe turned the book around and said loudly, look, the record of the martial god Sima Qian Sui has 2 volumes, but the record of the sword god has only 3 pages. Why is it so unreasonable? The blood jade lit up again and a voice rang out again, hey, have you ever doubted? Joey was surprised and thought, what? The illusory soul immediately replied, Manduke's descendants are called overlords, how can they live? Don't know anything like that? Joey said quietly, I don't know, who is rich and has 3 last names, is there any difference between royal people? Inside, Master Manduck pointed to dozens of gold bars stacked in a pile. He said solemnly, Manduck has never neglected his property duties in his entire life, I'll just leave it behind. It's already reached 100,000 francs, but after Manduck, how much of Joe's history remains in this world? Joey opened his eyes in surprise. 100,000 francs? Converted into modern times, the number would be about 375 tons, which is a very large number, isn't it? The mountains peeked out from behind the shadows of the trees. Master Manduck asked, do you have any business with me? Joey replied, transaction? Why do you suddenly mention that? Master Manduck frowned and replied, they are still very powerful, but if they have our help they will also be able to compete and stand. Head. Joey was surprised. Them? Who is that? Suddenly, Master Man Duck became extremely angry. His eyes showed resentment. He put his hands forward as if he wanted to crush something. He gritted his teeth and said, "What Man Duck wants is for the Sima family to perish." The resentment made Joey scared as well. He thought, occasionally I see him mention Sima. Because of them he develops hostility like that. But Sima T is now. Joey helplessly held his head and thought, "No, please say something reasonable. They are the first family in the world. Descendants of martial gods. How can a small guild leader like me destroy them?" Master Man Duck spoke up. "Man Nhi." Another voice rang out, "Yes, Master." An illusory soul approached behind Master Man Duck. He turned around and asked, "My son, can I pass on martial arts to this kid?" Man Ni's illusory soul immediately replied, "If the master has orders, I will try." Joey was surprised. "Who is that?" A stream of power radiated. The illusory soul gradually appeared. Its identity was the person who used his sword to quell a series of people. Joey was surprised. Is that the sword god Sao Thien, the heir of the most victorious sword trunk? Jihi in the back was still attentively reading the book and laughed loudly saying, "If the secret of the sword god is discovered, it will be a big deal." Joey in the front was shocked speechless. Master Man Duck and Sao Thien inside the blood jade spoke. He said, "Man Nhi." Sao Thien immediately replied, "Yes, Master." Master Man Duck stood opposite Sao Thien, clasped his hands behind him and asked, "Can I pass on the secret? Can you give me the money for this kid?" Sao Thien immediately replied, "As long as the descendants of the villain haven't died because of the dark merchants, it's possible." Master Man Duck nodded. Joey was still surprised and thought, "This person looks bloody good." Sao Thien said seriously, "I also see the world that you sometimes remember, images of modern means of transportation. Like planes, boats and a magnificent city appeared." Sao Thien continued, "The civilization and knowledge of that world are very amazing, a world that we cannot imagine." Joey was amazed, his face darkened in fear, thinking, "Damn it, can you even see that? No different from stalkers." Master Man Duck, inside the blood jade, raised his hand and asked, "If you combine that new knowledge of yours with our strength, you will be able to stand up and fight. Do you intend to trade now?" Joey struggled to think. The blood gem on his neck glowed. Joey held the reins tightly. Joey smiled and told himself he would trade. Green trees under a sky full of white clouds. A prosperous town located close together. Afternoon sunlight shining down on the bustling streets. Joey glanced around. A modern image suddenly appeared. A line of people holding phones were walking past each other. Back to reality, it was a group of people carrying goods to sell, smiling and chatting happily. Joey and Jihi walking along the street. The busy street was full of people. Joey thought to himself, "This neighborhood is like a giant living creature." Jihi walked in front, constantly admiring. Suddenly Jihi discovered a group of people holding flag. The crowd gathered around in a large circle. Inside there were two people standing, Jihi and Joey approaching. Jihi spoke up and asked an old man standing outside, "Old man, is this an opera?" The old man turned around and smiled and replied, "You're a naive young man. Is this your first time coming to see an opera?" Jihi smiled happily and said, "Yes. I am from Bangtae." The old man immediately replied, "So you had to travel a long way to get here?" Joey smiled and thought, I feel like people here don't need to be shy when talking to each other." Joey spoke up, "I'm also from Bangtae." The old man smiled and replied, "There are two kids from Bangtae Ah." The flag fluttered in the wind. Amidst the confetti fireworks flying in the air, two people inside the circle wearing opera costumes were performing together. People around shouted loudly, "There's Nam Oc Blood Demon. Heavenly swordplay." Joey suddenly thought to himself, do they want to use the life story of Hong Thien swordsman Nam Kung, the owner of the Nam Kung the Jia family, to do business? He is the idol of the people of Anhui. Jihi excitedly said with bright eyes, "Oh, Hong Thien swordplay." Two people dressed in opera and sword dancing faced each other. Below was a crowd. The audience cheered enthusiastically. Someone grinned crookedly. A group of people stood outside watching a play. A guy in the middle laughed and mocked. "These silly operas are still the same. The guy next to them also replied, "That's right. Elder Man Bakya said you would destroy Nam Oc Blood Ma is not Hong Thien swordsman but Thien Loi swordsman. Didn't he announce this on the Wanderers and Vans?" Another guy also spoke up and said, "These guys have never read precious books like the Wanderers and Vans." That guy immediately laughed and replied, "That's right." The people watching the opera immediately turned around and one person angrily asked, "Who are those people?" The person next to him also angrily said, "Who would dare?" Suddenly they saw the phoenix symbol on those people's shirts. That person immediately trembled in surprise and said, "Death. Damned." The two people immediately turned around, afraid to say anything. The old man angrily walked over and said, "You." Jihi immediately shouted angrily, "What the hell are you talking about?" Joey's face darkened in horror and called out, "Brother! Brother!" The guy with the phoenix symbol on his shirt turned around, eyes full of murderous intent, gritted his teeth and asked, "Who are you?" Jihi held up the book in his hand and shouted loudly, "I am a lover of the streets and clouds." Image of a person holding a bag of some kind, blood flowing from the bag and falling to the ground. Jihi said, "Of course Thien Loi Dao guessed. Was the person who directly took away the head of the blood demon Nam Oc at that time. No one dares to comment on that truth." Followed by the image of a man whose body was covered in red hand prints. An old man was bandaging him. Jihi continued, "But when the missing great sword master Hong Thien returned to the family after half a year, what was the red handprint engraved on that body? Isn't that the great swordsman of Blood Heaven?" Jihi stood in front of that guy and shouted loudly, even though he was injured by the great swordsman of Blood Heaven, Nam Oc Blood Demon's highest skill, he still won. And return. That's the truth that everyone in Anhui knows. The man frowned silently. Jihi continued to firmly say, "I really respect Manbakya, Mr. Chu Kat Hu Van, but no one is perfect." Joey stood beside him and looked at Jihi with a bright light. Eyes admiring and thinking, "What a true martial artist." Joey quickly shook his head and thought again, "No wait, the opponent is the Chu Kat the family. That noble is the 5 great families." Named Chu Kat Hu Van was annoyed and asked, "You saw it?" Jihi immediately replied, "Yes. The Tan Thien swordsman and the knights of Nam Kung the Jia are lying." Chu Kat Hu Van immediately laughed mockingly, "No matter what, this rumor is still spreading throughout Anhui. Our elder man Bakya has come to the house to confirm the truth." Not accepting that invitation happened to be Nam Kung the Jia. Jihi was surprised, so. Chu Kat Hu Van continued, "Of course, as elder man Bakya, it is true that after the battle, the Tan Thien swordsman defeated Nam Oc Blood Demon. Or being knocked unconscious by the great swordsman's blood, then after regaining consciousness and returning to the family, you know that." Jihi angrily asked, "You? What did you say?" Jihi shouted angrily, "So did Manbakya directly see Thien Loi Daoist beheading Nam Oc Blood Demon? He cut off the head of Nam Oc Blood Demon and took it away." The old man and the crowd behind him laughed and said, "He cut off his head and left." Chu Kat Hu Van's eyes suddenly turned red. His face was blazing. Chu Kat Hu Van's murderous, angry voice, "Even if you are a civilian, you are still responsible for your words." Joey stood behind in horror. Eyes dark. Joey quickly ran back. Joey smiled and put his arm around Jiwi's shoulder and said, "These big brothers seem to have lost their minds, he's crazy." Jihi was surprised. "What?" Joey immediately spoke. Said, "Let's go. Why are you running out like that?" "Let's go play with the dog." Joey quickly covered his mouth. Jihi pushed him back again. "Let's talk, you crazy guy." Dusk gradually falls in the town. At a boarding house with lanterns hanging outside. Joey and Jihi sat facing each other. Joey helplessly put his hand on his forehead and said, "If you don't cause trouble then." Joey angrily scolded Jihi. Luckily there were many people watching in the center of the market. "Do you want to receive funeral money? I told you from home." Jihi sadly bowed his head and replied, "No." Joey angrily gritted his teeth and shouted loudly, "Damn, it's not a bad thing. You clearly promised not to open your mouth. So why did you start a fight with the noble family as soon as you arrived at Ho-Fi? Holding a wooden sword but thinking of holding a diamond sword?" Joey recalled the image Jihi had said before when riding on horseback together on the road. Joey was annoyed and said, Didn't you say it was because I was talented that the is your life indulgent? Ji-hee looked away embarrassed. Joey reached for the cup of tea on the table and angrily said, if anything happens, I'm sure the Martial Arts Alliance master would have been beaten by you. Yes, you're really crazy, really crazy. Joey angrily picked up the cup of tea and drank it quickly. Joey was still very angry. Suddenly Ji-hee turned and raised his hand to call out, here, here. Lee Jan-jae stepped forward and asked in surprise, what is going on? Joey angrily replied, nothing, please sit down quickly. Joey spoke up, please tell me everything you know related to Namkung the Jia, please help me. Lee Jan-jae said thoughtfully, Namkung the Jia? Joey immediately said, brother. I know all the information I got from the information dealer or in the Fongban Lo gang. Joey seriously continued, what I want is the personalities and activities of important people in Namkung the Jia, including the current homeowners, personal preferences, relationship preferences, conflicts. The bad things they hide, it's things like that. Lee Jan-jae replied, let's see, brother, the information you want is important information that even information dealers can't buy and sell. Joey asked, is there no way? Lee Jan-jae raised the teacup and replied, it's not impossible. Joey was surprised, is there a way? Lee Jan-jae said with cold eyes, better than Kai Bang is Da Deep or Wei Ha Lam. Image of a person sitting on a roof opposite a window with two people standing inside. Lee Jan-jae continued, if it's that giant information organization, it will definitely have the information you want, a businessman like me. There's no way to meet them, even if I could, the fee they charge would be very expensive. Joey put his hand on his chin and thought, you said Da Deep, Wei Ha Lam. Lee Jan-jae immediately replied, it's the legendary information organizations in the gang. Lee Jan-jae frowned and said, such rumors, but whether they are actually true or not is still a mystery. Joey pondered. Ordinary information organizations have already offered absurdly high prices. Joey asked, how long would it take to request an audience? Lee Jan-jae sighed. Image of a large crowd of people waiting in front of the city gate. Lee Jan-jae spoke up and said, the number of people who sent invitations to visit. How many people a day does Namkung the Jia have? There were hundreds of people, even the face of the 78-year-old internal gardener, Mr. Namkung Bok, could not be seen, so he had to return. Joey said in surprise, hundreds of people every day. Image of a general, the soldier and officer appeared in the middle of a sacred tablet engraved with the image of a prestigious golden dragon. Lee Jan-jae replied, that's right. If you ask for an audience, they will give you a ticket according to the identity of the visitor to the Mandarin's palace, and military officers will receive a golden chamber ticket, while people in the rivers and lakes will receive a silver chamber. Image of a group of people with weapons carried on their bodies. Lee Jan-jae continued, of course the others will be eliminated, at least they must be the heirs of the family to be accepted. Joey continued, followed by an image of two people with a pile of goods and large swords. In the middle is still a spiritual tablet engraved with a golden dragon image. Lee Jan-jae said, those related to Namkung the Jia agreed, including the family's relatives and those who provided food, clothing or weapons. Joey suddenly asked, what's next? ? Followed by images of swordsmen skilled in martial arts. Lee Jan-jae said, of course next are those who want to join the family who will receive the red chamber. Is to constantly increase power. The image of the spiritual tablet was now engraved with a dragon image but had turned purple. Lee Jan-jae continued, ultimately the merchants who want to open up new trade. And those who ask for help like you. Those who want to ask for help will receive the bar. Joey seemed worried and put his hand to his chin and said, golden, silver, copper, pink, the last bar. Joey was depressed and thought to himself, they are indeed vile and expensive people. Joey dejectedly thought to himself, they are indeed vile and expensive people. Joey clasped his hands in front and said, thank you for taking care of me. Lee Jan-jae immediately replied, I'm sorry for not helping you. What do you plan to do? Joey seriously said, first we have to meet. Tomorrow I will go to Namkung the Jia. Lee Jan-jae clasped his hands in front and bowed his head, I wish you luck. The night was gradually falling and the lanterns outside the inn were already lit. The sun gradually peeks out from behind the clouds. The bright sunlight shines throughout the town. At the motel where Joey and Jihee spent the night. Jihee had finished preparing his clothes and walked out and said, "I'm going to practice in the morning." Joey was still lying in bed and replied, "Yes." Joey still couldn't open his eyes and said sleepily, "You're really hardworking." The voice inside the blood gem rang out again, "When will Sword Trung go?" The blood gem on Joey's neck flew high. Joey looked at it silently. Joey sat up tiredly and sighed and asked, "Must we go to Kiamtrung?" Sao Thien said seriously inside the blood jade, "Those who have not gone through sword middle school will not be able to understand my sword learning." "I have said it many times but you don't understand?" Joey sighed and replied, "Elder, for ordinary people it is very far. It would take at least 4 or 5 months. You know I have many things to do here in Anhui." Sao Thien was angry and sighed. Shouted loudly, "Go! Do you think my sword learning is just that simple? If this sword god Sao Thien teaches you unique martial arts, that's the secret that can be passed on to future generations." Joey thought gloomily, the sword middle that the sword god talks about is the border of modern Zen City and Gansu City. If you go to those 2 cities, right? It's very far. The map from where Joey lives to where he needs to go appears. Joey thinks, at least 5 months, no. If you encounter a bandit or an injured horse, it might take longer, it's all about money and time. Joey sat on the bed angrily, thinking, but I can't let this opportunity to let the sword god teach me martial arts slip away. Joey spoke up and said, "I'll go to Kiamtrung as quickly as possible." Sao Thien immediately asked, "When are we going?" Joey immediately replied, "Nangong the Jia's affairs are still unknown, 1 month or 2 months. Sao Thien then shouted loudly, "Too late. Min's disciples have been training since I was 5 or 6, don't you see that you're already 20 years old? Right now your bones and blood vessels are gradually stiffening." Sao Thien's whole body radiated strength. A blinding light emitted from his chest. Sao Thien angrily shouted, "So no. Even if I have to consume my spiritual energy, I will still borrow your body for a while, please prepare." The blood gem on Joey's neck flew up. Joey was surprised. "Huh, borrowed my body?" The blood jade radiated the power to create a tornado. Sao Thien said loudly, "I will increase my spiritual power and borrow your body for a while." Joey panicked and blocked the power of the blood jade. Again, with difficulty shouted, "No. Elder, wait." A stream of light suddenly emitted, the light covered the air. Then the power dissipated, leaving only smoke flying down on Joey. Joey lowered his head. Sao Thien had entered Joey's body. Sao Thien got out of bed and angrily said, "An inferior body." A stream of power surrounded Sao Thien. Sao Thien said, "The time to control the body is less than half moment, 7 to 8 minutes, so I will use good immortal true energy." Joey's soul worriedly said, "Elder, if it is good immortal true energy then." Suddenly Sao Thien's whole body started to it swelled up and tore his clothes. Sao Thien shouted, "So noisy." Sao Thien used his internal energy to make Joey's body gradually become bigger, each muscle appeared. Joey inside said in surprise, "What? Hulk?" Every abdominal area on Joey's body was clearly visible. Joey could not hide his surprise. Suddenly brown liquid flowed out from Joey's body. Sao Thien waved his hand. Joey's strong body appeared behind torn layers of clothing. Sao Thien said, "Using good immortal true energy, my tendons and veins will be opened." Joey trembled inside. He forced a smile and said, "Elder, as far as I know, if you use good immortal true energy, your chances of survival will increase." Sao Thien outside took off his shirt and calmly replied, "If your life expectancy is reduced by about 10 years, what's the big deal?" Quote. Joey inside heard it like lightning struck his ears and cried loudly, "What, 10 years? Joey is concerned about longevity. A price to pay for health. Strong." Then old master looked back at Joey's body. "After inheriting my strength and swordsmanship, what's the big deal about something like a 10-year reduction in lifespan?" Then he used his vitality to release purple smoke and fly around. Is returning Joey's body. After a while, Joey also returned to his body. Realizing that he had returned to his body, the old master had also returned. That purple smoke gradually disappeared in space. He was surprised because he felt something. He screamed. Joey's body changed rapidly. All limbs were in pain as if something was moving chaotically in his body. Blood Knock of the family spoke up. Your mind is so weak, that's all it hurts. Why are you screaming so loud? He kept screaming because of the excruciating pain. It seemed like he couldn't bear it anymore. Old Master said, because I have consumed too much spiritual energy, I cannot talk to you for the time being, but you must improve your physical and mental strength. After those constant changes, gradually everything returned to the way it was. On a clear blue morning, the light also shone on the floor. In Joey's room, he was lying there crying out because he was very tired after the recent event. He sat up, his head seemed dizzy. Uncomfortable dizziness. A powerful light suddenly emitted from his hand. Perhaps his strength had been enhanced. He tried to examine his body. He secretly praised it for being great. Joey noticed the change in his eyes. Thinking, plus my eyes have read this story many times in books. My blurred eyes can suddenly see everything clearly. Then he walked to the window and looked out into the distance, surprised to can even see very far. What is this all about? You look far ahead and see things far away from where you stand. This is not your eyesight, ordinary person. He felt some kind of chaotic power rising inside his body. Could this be an internal force? Joey raised his hand, preparing to test that power. He waved his hand, and then that wave of his hand was like a sharp sword swing with a very sharp amount of power. He looked back at his hand. I then exclaimed, now I understand why he's so obsessed with martial arts. He held my hand tightly and continued, I don't know what realm I've reached now, but I'm sure this will help me a lot in my daily life. Then Joey grabbed the shirt and smiled confidently, thinking, first let's go to Nam Kung the Jia. This bustling street is filled with light. The light shines into a very magnificent looking place. Many people step into the gate of a noble palace. This must be Nam Kung the Jia. Two people, Joey and Jihi, also came here. Jihi beamed when he saw the magnificent things around. A man guarding the gate standing nearby said, please come and fill in the list of visitors and then go to the area. Welcoming guests. Joey and Jihi quickly approached and filled in their names. He filled in his name on the paper that said, Joey Iron Ward Onwi. The man looked at him writing and smiled slightly, which caught his attention. Then Jihi was confused and shyly said to that gatekeeper, I'm Jihi and I'm also a martial arts practitioner, but not before. No matter what I did, Joey dragged me away. Joey looked a bit angry. The guard man looked at the two of them and still smiled contemptuously, thinking they were a bunch of idiots. Inside the reception area, there are many tables arranged for guests. There are a lot of people inside. Two people, Joey and Jihi, slowly walked in. Jiwi's eyes lit up with excitement. Then Jihi said, I see. Just filling in the list to visit makes me feel pressured. I heard that the real Nam Kung the Jia must be from the backyard onwards. I don't know if we can accommodate it here. How many people? Joey replied, that's right, he answered in passing. As he sat at the table, Joey felt uncomfortable and silently sighed, thinking, if everyone present here received an invitation, I came here today in vain. Jihi was still excitedly looking around. He put his hand on his cheek, thinking, is there any way to stand out? From afar, there was an old man looking towards Joey's table. His lips moved slightly as if he was about to say something. Then he walked up to the two people's table and said, how could that be? Today, they were all country bumpkins, old people. Joey saw that and suddenly exclaimed. Yesterday, because he had something to do, he didn't have time to say goodbye. The two brothers immediately greeted him respectfully. Jihi happily said, what's the matter with the old man coming to Nam Kung the Jia? The old man smiled softly and nodded but did not answer, which made Joey wonder. Do you entertain guests like that? He spoke, and two people, Joey and Jihi, were surprised to hear him say that. Nearby, someone ran to and bowed to him to pay his respects. Bu Woon Ji, what do you need? It turns out this person is Bu Woon Ji. He said that he gave these two people a golden invitation and took them to the backyard. When they heard it, they were extremely surprised. According to the principle, they have to wait here until they receive the official invitation. Furthermore, not all outsiders will be led to the Hong Thien Dam courtyard. Not the inner courtyard far away, the housekeeper said, confused. Then Bu Woon Ji angrily scolded, so bold, You kids now don't know how to respect your seniors at all. You always pretend to be busy, these two young people. I'm the only one protecting the people of Nam Kung the Jia from the Zug people. I was about to invite them a drink but you dare to stop me. Mr. Bu Woon Ji was angry. Behind him were Joey and Jihi who also felt confused. Puppet. The butler quickly bowed his head to listen to the command, please follow your orders. The two of them looked at each other not knowing what to say. Then they burst out laughing happily, they really luck. In the backyard of Nam Kung the Jia, Joey and Jihi were led inside. To a certain house, they sat down at a table to wait. A woman came in and said, my lord, I'll pour more tea for you. Really no need, he politely. Inside the necklace that Joey was wearing, emitting purple light, there was a voice. Old Master spoke. Isn't that calligraphy from the Enku period? Joey wondered. He asked, what is calligraphy from the Enku period? You think, if it's the Enku period, then is it Bronze Age calligraphy? The Enku that Old Master mentioned when looking at this calligraphy was referring to the Yuan dynasty in Chinese history. Joey didn't seem to believe very much, so he said, it's probably not a mistake, right? Old Master said, a kid like you dares to doubt the eyes of a great scholar. Did he travel at that time? Joey was confused and said sorry. Then Old Master continued, that thing is definitely an ancient method. It is definitely a method discovered by a great scholar of the Han dynasty and presented to the emperor. The seventh. It's definitely a peach blossom mixed star map, it can't be wrong. Is that a peach blossom mixed star map? He was puzzled. Old Master continued, that calligraphy isn't a painting of a waterfall. He stared at the paintings in front of him, listening to Old Master speak. The blooming peach blossoms were painted with rooster blood. The stars in the sky were painted with powder ground from white stone, trees drawn with charcoal. So no matter how long it takes, the painting won't change color, but I didn't expect it to be preserved so well, it's really surprising. Old Master gave him more knowledge, he was no less partly surprised. Joey understood. The two of them looked carefully at the beautiful picture in front of them. Old Master praised, even though I don't know who the owner of this painting is, I really want to give the reward to that person. Joey looked at the painting and said, Dao Hua mixed star dew. It's really curious, a picture painted with rooster blood and white stone powder thousands of years ago and yet the color has not changed at all. There was something broken that looked like a bottle of wine. Bu Woon Ji was holding a bottle of wine to invite guests when Joey's words surprised him so much that he accidentally broke it. The wine bottle on the floor. How do you know Dao Hua mixed star dew? He asked in surprise. Bu Woon Ji said in surprise. The most talented scholar in Anhui, even the best person at calligraphy today. If I didn't know anything about this painting, it would take this old man 80 years to find out. Today is a day full of amazing things. Then he walked up to him and asked, Boy, where's your master? What master? Joey also asked. Became confused and blamed himself for not knowing why he was babbling just now. Old Master appeared and said, Don't worry about anything, just say you are a descendant of Van Tuong Sao. Joey pondered thinking, Who is that Van Tuong Sao? Old Master immediately replied, That's my nickname in the world. It turned out to be Old Master's nickname, looks really cool. Then Joey immediately replied, I am a descendant of Van Tuong Sao. Van Tuong Sao. Is the Van Tuong Sao you mentioned the person? Bu Woon Ji asked in surprise. Could it be that the great scholar Han Lam lived 300 years ago? A descendant of Chu Du? Of course it is. That's right, if you are a descendant of that great scholar, then this is the greatest blessing of Trung Nguyen. From afar there was the sound of footsteps coming in. What's going on? The two of them, the old man came and went. This person who was brought by me spoke up. Meet my senior Joey, he respectfully. The old man said happily, Finally you are looking for already a disciple? Bu Woon Ji smiled and replied, That's Van Tuong Sao's defender, how dare I do that? Who is that Van Tuong Sao? He wondered. Van Tuong Sao doesn't know, Bu Woon Ji said with a small smile. So this person is not your disciple? Bu Woon Ji's younger brother asked. Yes, but what's wrong? Bu Woon Ji asked again. Then someone ran up and used his hand to grab Joey's collar, making him uncomfortable. The old man smiled and said, So this kid will be mine. which made Joey puzzled that he didn't know what was going on. A tall old man who had just arrived said, "Water flows from high to low. How dare you robbing someone in front of me has opened up all the meridians." The tall old man said angrily. Then the one holding Joey's collar smiled teasingly and said, "You also keep an eye on what about this kid?" He was grabbing Joey's collar when he realized, it's really strange, just looking at the hand shows that it hasn't practiced swordplay. Looking at its appearance, it's not like someone who has practiced punching and kicking. How could it escape its physical body and open up all its meridians and blood? While he was holding Joey, he felt seeing that he was overflowing with some kind of power. He was also somewhat puzzled, then he thought more. When the human body reaches a certain level, it can be reincarnated and reincarnated. Then you can break the limits of the normal physical body, that is to change skin. Only after clearing the veins can you try to open the veins. But its body has not yet reached the super peak. Those who have reached the super peak just need to look to know the other person's realm. He opened his eyes and stared at Joey, the old man, and said, "It seems like you have increased your strength many times in just a short period of time. Until now, I have never seen anyone increase their strength as quickly as you." Joey heard this and felt a bit guilty, because he knew where that strength came from. The person holding Joey said, But it takes others at least 30 years to be like you. It seems like you've already made a pill. The old man has not yet achieved the alchemy. Just with this internal skill you can become unparalleled in the world. He sighed and said. Then Bu Woon-ji immediately exclaimed, "If I've reached the point of formation, why don't I realize it? If so, isn't this child the most suitable person to train to reach greatness? Great realm, that is the highest realm that no one has achieved except Chil Mujua, the strongest person in the world. Today's lake." Then the elder of the three of them laughed. "There's no such thing, it's not that easy." But if you think about his age, the person standing next to Joey watched review. After a conversation between the three of them, Joey said, "Can you guys put me down first? My body is not very comfortable." Hearing that, he happily let go. Then he moved closer to Joey and said, "Don't you think about having a last name? As long as you are a direct member of the Nam Kung the family, you can use our Nam Kung family name as your family name. I will consider you as my adopted son." Joey heard what he said and was so surprised that he exclaimed, "What?